Well, let's get more now on our top story on NHS funding. Speak to the former Health Secretary and now Chair of the NHS Confederation. That's a membership organisation for all the different bodies that commission and supply NHS services. Stephen Dorrell. Mr. Dorrell, good to speak to you. Thanks for coming in to talk to us this evening. First obvious question is, what do you make of the government's announcement of this additional funding?
Well, first point to make is that it's extremely welcome that the government is providing significant increase in funding for the NHS. But the second thing is to couple that with recognition that this is, in truth, the government itself recognises only a partial solution, because if we want to deliver good health policy, yes, of course we want funding in the NHS, but we have to understand the link between NHS and the rest of local public services, in particular social care, which is why from the NHS Confederation we said ahead of this announcement that what we needed in order to meet demand and to start to address some of the issues in the health service is not just 4% for the NHS. Well, we haven't quite got that, but we needed 4% for the NHS. We also need 4% for social care in order to deliver proper, joined up local public services.
Social care funding has been cut between 2009 and 2016 by something like 21%. This presumably is nowhere near capable of closing the gap that, in a sense, the NHS then is having to pick up with all those extra costs that come from people who haven't received that care who should have done.
Well, that's precisely right, and it's worth just reflecting for a second. We all know, don't we, that we have in this country, and it's a good thing that we have, a growing elderly population. People are living longer. And in particular, we also know that some of the fastest growth is in the population aged over 85. Now, that is, of course, precisely the group that benefits significantly from social care. Social care is about more than the care of the elderly, but in particular, older people benefit from social care. And when social care doesn't deliver the support that it's designed to deliver, the result shows up in the National Health Service. That's bad health policy. Actually, even more important than that, it's bad for those people concerned. So that's why seeing the NHS in isolation from the rest of local public services is, in my view, to miss the point. It's to treat illness rather than try to sustain health.
What about how we fund this longer term? Because a decade ago, when Tony Blair was Prime Minister and Gordon Brown is Chancellor, they did this announcement of taking extra money out of the tax system in order to supposedly bring health spending up to the European level. But of course the European funding has continued to go up, and we're in a sense been playing catch up. Now the Prime Minister is saying, well, you might have to pay a bit more on tax. Do we have to have a bit more of a kind of a grown-up debate about how we pay for this? Because presumably we've got to commit not this current generation of taxpayers, but future generations of taxpayers as well, to fund it and to want to carry on funding it.
Well, actually, all the evidence is that if you talk to people, I was an MP for 36 years, if I talk to my former constituents, if I look at the evidence about how people think about health and social care and public services, it's hardly a revelation to say these services are paid for out of taxation. So if, as an advanced and wealthy society, we want to measure ourselves against the test of looking properly after sick, elderly, dependent people, of course that costs money. And I'm pleased the Prime Minister has acknowledged today that if we're going to deliver our ambition of world-class healthcare, that will cost money, and the bill will have to be paid by the taxpayer.
Finally, is the message then be bold?
It is to be bold, but actually not to persuade yourself that you're being massively bold when you're telling voters that the National Health Service, local public services are paid for out of taxation. You might find they've got there first.
Stephen Dorrell, former Health Secretary, thanks very much. Right, time for a look at the weather prospects now with Matt Taylor.